Hi everyone, welcome to Rocket Rose Art. My name is Jeff. In this video I'm going to do something a little bit different. I've been asked a few times about the equipment I use and how I set it all up. So I'm going to run you through the equipment that I use, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about basically my little philosophy on recycling and reusing things. I just love recycling and reusing things. Get a great kick out of taking something that looks fairly useless or has lost its life and giving it a new life in some way or other. So that's pretty much what I'm going to cover as I'm showing you this. So we'll just get into showing you each area one by one, and then I'll come back and summarise. So the first thing I want to show you is my cutting station. This is an old shower under our house that I've converted, basically because it's a good wet area to work, don't have a problem with water on the floor and everywhere else. So in here you can see I've put a shelf in here, and sitting on the shelf is the trim saw that I use most of the time. Now I only use a trim saw because most of the material that I work with is only fairly thin. The blade on the trim saw, as you can see, is not very deep. It doesn't have a very deep cut. So that wouldn't be very good if you were doing normal lapidary where you've got fairly thick material you have to cut. But because most of what I do is with Jefferite, which is around a quarter of an inch, 6 mils thick, this blade is ample. And these units are quite cheap. I think I paid $140 for this, and the blades are just a few dollars, so it's quite inexpensive to run. As opposed to the ring saw, which you'll see over here, that's quite an expensive unit. I think they're well over $1,000, and the blades, they're quite expensive as well. And one of the things to consider too is that the rings in these, when you're cutting your material, they cut a fairly wide path, so you lose a lot of material, whereas the saws in the little trim saw are very thin and you don't lose much material at all. The other thing in here is you'll see I've put a shelf up here for all my bits and pieces. My face mask, some rags, and over here, turn around, there's my earmuffs and an apron. Now that's a good heavy apron so that the water doesn't get through and get me soaked, which is always good. What else can I tell you about? Let me have a look at my little checklist here. I think that's about it for in here. I'll take you over now and show you my little grinding station. So this here is my grinding station. It's made of a couple of bits of equipment. The first thing is the flat lap. Now this is a horizontal flat lap. It is an old lapidary unit that I purchased some time ago and I've had sitting around before I put it into service, so to speak. Didn't need any work on it, it worked fine. The only thing I've done is created a water unit out of an old bucket, a couple of shelf brackets, a bit of copper wire and a bit of tubing, which works perfectly well. I don't have any problem with whatsoever. You can see right there the plastic tubing and a bit of wire, and that allows me to move the tubing out over the laps when I'm working so I get a feed of water. Sitting there is a chair I sit on, and sitting on top of the flat lap you can see two magnetic discs. One is a diamond lap, the one on the bottom, and the one above that is a felt lap for polishing. Now the diamond laps I have come in different grades. For rough grinding I'm generally using at the coarsest a 180 up to a 320 diamond lap. The other thing you can see here, same thing, I've got an apron there and a rag hanging on the door. and you can see that light there, which is just a light I purchased. I think I got it from the hardware or something like that. It gives me the light, and I can just turn that around when I'm working on the other piece of equipment, which is probably more familiar to a lot of glass workers, which is a little glass grinder. Now on this I can do different shapes, and there are quite a few attachments and different size bits, which you can see on the very top there, which are diamond, and this also works off of water, or I should say with water. It has a reservoir underneath it, and that sponge you can see sitting there sits behind the spindle, and the handle of a toothbrush that you see there is my pusher. So when I'm trying to push small pieces through there with a guide or something like that, I use that, and saves my fingers. Below that you can see I have a selection of diamond hand pads, which I use occasionally, but generally they're slow. Even though you can go from very coarse grits up to very fine grits, they're slow to use. So they're not too bad for the final finish before you polish, but other than that, look, I use them very rarely. What else can I tell you on here? The bottle there is just a spray bottle. It's an old window cleaner bottle that I use to when I'm working on the grinder, to just clean off glass and clean off the ground glass that's around there, just so I can keep it clean. And I think that's about it for that area. I don't think there's anything I can tell you about. As you can see, the little unit there, the little timber unit there that the grinder is sitting on, I'm not even sure what it was. I picked it up at a second-hand store, and then I cut the sides of it so that it gave me free access into the grinder when I had long pieces or something like that. So a lot of this is old equipment or recycled equipment. I think in all of that I probably bought new the light, and that's about it. I think everything else I had sitting in my workshop. So I try very hard to keep things inexpensive, recycle where possible. Okay, so this little area here is where I dop up my stones. Now you can see it's pretty basic. You can see a few stones already dopped up there. That's an old cutting board that everything's sitting on. You can see my little spirit burner there that I use for heating the wax. There's a couple of other things there that aren't used for doing cabochons. There's a bunch of brass stop sticks that I use when I'm faceting. I have a faceting machine here as well. But mainly what's used for the cabochons is the spirit burner, and in that little margarine tin you can see a selection of dop sticks. There's some aluminium ones there. There's some wooden dowel ones there as well. And of course the tripod where I put the camera when I'm working in here. There are a few other things here, like a very small torch there, and some things like the chemicals to get anything that I've dopped up with super glue off, and also when I'm getting off gemstones that I've cut on my faceting machine. I'll show you the facet machine, but it doesn't really relate to the Jefferite because I don't really facet it. So that's just a very old faceting machine that I purchased a number of years ago, and it works fine. A new one would be better because it would be more accurate, but it works fine for what I want to do. The other bit of equipment you see back is a tumbler there. We also tumble a few stones. But this is basically my little workstation as far as dopping up, preparing to cut the cabochons. Now here we have the diamond wheels that I do the final shaping on. These are the ones that you will see in a lot of the videos where I'm showing you with cutting the cabochons. The unit itself is second-hand. I bought it second-hand. It just needed a little bit of TLC to get it up and running. Obviously I had to buy new diamond wheels for it, and on the end I had to buy a a new felt pad there for polishing. So the idea here is that on the front there are two wheels. One is a 1200 and I think the other one at the moment is a 600, but I can always also go down and put a 320 on it. And in normal lapidary you would go through the different grits, and in fact in normal lapidary work you would probably have a unit that had something like 6 wheels. This is an old 2-wheeler. I think it's probably something like 60 years old or 50 years old or something like that, but it's fairly old. I've modified it slightly. The rubber bit that you see on the end there I've put on, and I've also put the little water reservoir at the bottom there for polishing. Not that I polish a lot of the Jefferite or anything else. I do a little bit of it, but I don't do a lot because I think, as I've said in my videos, when I go to the 1200 wheel on here, because these are hard wheels, it's very hard to get rid of all of the facets off of the dome. And when you go to the cerium doesn't cut much, it just polishes. So you end up with the facets showing when it's polished. So that's why I polish in a kiln. A bit more about this, the little tubes you see that feed the water, irrigation tubes that I had left over from putting some irrigation in from my veggie plot. The little valves on it are also part of the irrigation system, and these are fed by some water bottles, demineralized water bottles that my wife buys the water when she's ironing in, and it just relies on gravity feed. So all I'd have to do is a little suck on on that tube and get the water flowing easily. Obviously I clean it before I put my mouth on it. And that works perfectly well. And there's enough water in that bottle there to get me through quite a bit of work. This metal bar that you see across here is purely for putting my phone on when I'm doing the videos. And that little unit there, I just patched together from a bunch of bits and pieces that I had sitting around. That is goes up and is attached to the ceiling in here, because if I run it and attach it to anything on the table, the vibration would make it almost impossible to use. So it goes up and attaches to the bearers, which I'll show you in a minute, on the ceiling, because we are under my house. The light does the same thing. It's just a table lamp. I've attached it to a long piece of wood that goes up, and that swivels so that I can move. I'll try and do it. Swivel so I can move my light from one wheel to the other nice and easy. I'll just show you. They go up all the way and they attach to the bearer above. Nice simple solution. Timber I already had, nuts and bolts I already had. The light on the side is, oops, excuse my finger. The light on the side again, just another table lamp, and that whole unit that the bottles are sitting on and that the light sits into is just something I put together from a lot of bits and pieces I had lying around. In fact, it was made from the doors of the kitchen we took out of this house a few years back when we replaced the kitchen. So finally, you keep hearing me talking about fire polishing my cabochons in a kiln. This is the kiln that I use. It was purchased second-hand. I've had to do nothing to it, and I've probably had it about a good 6-7 years. The only thing I've done is made a stand for it. The stand down the bottom, believe it or not, is an old coffee table, which I took the glass off and made a top for it. That's about the only thing I've ever done in this kiln. I've never had any repairs. I just keep it clean, and it's served me very well. I do have another kiln over here, but this is one that Anne uses primarily for things like precious metal clay and enamel. Now in theory I could use that, but it's got a very small opening, so I could fire polish in that, but generally I have quite a few to do, so that's not really suitable. So to summarise all of that, you probably got a fairly good feel that I like to recycle and find other uses for things. So I would strongly encourage you not to get too caught up in thinking you've got to spend thousands of dollars for equipment when look around for second-hand equipment. It just needs to be in a reasonable condition, and you can usually give it a bit of TLC and make it useful. Obviously, things like wheels, there are things that you have to buy new, you can't get around, but yeah, look for second-hand things. Now, if there's anything that I haven't covered that you'd like to ask, just ask in the comments and I will answer you in the comments. And I hope that has covered everything on a lot of your questions at least. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.